For our next project, you're going to come up with a particular design that can cover our walls in our graphic design lab. I've taken a picture of each of the walls, so this is wall 1, wall 2, and wall 3, all three of them that's in our computer lab. And you're going to create something as if it was a mural to go on one of these blank walls. What I want you to do is to take your design into Photoshop and actually place it onto the wall and make it look like it's actually there, giving a real-world mock-up of the design before it's actually painted onto the wall. Now this is going to pose some particular problems or challenges because, first of all, your wall is in perspective, and I'm going to allow you to use any media that you want. So if you want to draw it off by hand or do a painting, if you want to use vector drawing in Adobe Illustrator, or if you just want to create it all in Photoshop, I'll leave it up to you. In the handout, I've given you the dimensions for each of the walls, and I'm going to show you the one that I created for this wall. Now this wall is, I believe, 27 feet wide by 8 feet tall, and I created my design in Adobe Illustrator, so this is all vector. And you can see it has something to do with graphic design. That's another thing. I want the theme of your design to be some aspect of graphic design. It could be history, typography, printing, printmaking, a particular designer, a particular design period. Whatever you want to do, I'm going to leave that up to you. In my case, I chose typography. And let's bring this, this object into Photoshop to work in. First of all, I'm going to select it all and hit copy. Then I'm going to jump into Photoshop, where you see I've got my picture already created. The first thing I need to do is to make a document that's the size and dimensions, or at least the same proportions that my wall is. So I'm going to go to File and create a new. In our case, I'm going to swap it over to inches. It's going to be about 27 inches wide by 8 inches tall. For the resolution, you don't have to have it as high as 300. As a matter of fact, if you were ever working on a billboard or working on a banner, a huge graphic that's going to be really big anyway, you don't want to have a high resolution because these are usually seen at a distance. So having such a high resolution as the distance really is too much. You can already see this is going to be a 55 megabyte image. This is without adding any layers. So I'm going to drop my resolution down to say 150, and we'll hit OK. The next thing I need to do is go ahead and paste in my objects. I'm going to move my layers out of the way so we can see it. Hit Command V to paste it. Since it's vector, it's going to ask me what do I want to do. I just want to have pixels, and we'll say OK. Make it slightly bigger just because I know that I've messed up on the edges. I want it to go all the way to the edge on everything. Hit Return, and I've got my image nice and rasterized in Photoshop. Next thing I want to do is to be able to flatten my layers, so I'm working with just one layer. Choose Flatten, and let's copy and paste it into the photo that we're working with. In this case, I can click and just drag it into there to work with. That's looking pretty good. Since it is pretty big, you may have to scale it down just a little bit. And you can do this by going up to Edit, choose Transform and Scale. Since it's really big, I don't see my entire bounding box. You can always go up to the top, and here's a particular height and width. Clicking this icon will keep them proportional. If I typed it down to 50, I've scaled it down to about 50%. That's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and actually scale it up just a little bit more. So I've got my image into the document that I want to work with. Here's the next challenge. I need to know where the individual points on this wall are. So to do this, we need to drag off some guides. I'm going to turn off visibility for layer 1 for now and make sure that my rulers are turned on. If you don't see them, they're at the top and the left-hand side of your screen. You can always go to View and say Show Rulers right here, or Command R will turn them on and off. To create a guide, let's zoom in to this particular area. I want to be able to make a guide that follows this vertical line on my on the wall. Click on the ruler and drag it out. You can see there will be a line to follow you. I'm just going to place the line right about here on my wall. And so I've got a good vertical alignment. You can see it's going to be off by a little bit. This is just a mock-up, which will be okay for now. Let's do the same thing for this one. Click and drag off a ruler and place it along this corner of the wall. Next thing, clicking and dragging the top corner down till it aligns and intersects with this particular area. So there's my next one. I'll zoom back out. Let's do the same thing for this particular side. Click and drag down for there. Another tricky area is going to be down here at the bottom. Since everything is being covered up by the bookshelf and by this desk, I'm going to have to kind of guesstimate and eyeball where that will intersect. So if I follow the line of the bottom of this one, I can see that it intersects right about here, right where it's meeting at the chords on the keyboard. So I'm going to click and drag. Right about there would be good enough. Same way with this one. If I followed this line, it's going to intersect just above the logo on our printer. So I'm going to click and drag, pull down right about there. Good enough. All right, let's turn back on our layer 1, which has my typographic design. Now we need to put this design into perspective. We actually need to distort and warp it to where it needs to go. Let's zoom back out so we can see the whole thing. With it selected, I'm going to go back up to Edit, Transform, and there's a couple of options you can choose. There is a perspective option, but this one really won't give you the best control. What I like to use is Distort. With Distort selected, I can click on any of the edges and move it around, and you can see it will skew and warp my design to where I need it to be. And all I got to do is click and drag each of the edges to match up with the corners of the guides that I created. In this case, there it is right there. When I hit return, you can lock it in. And if you ever need to hide your guides, hit Command and the colon, and I'll turn off your guides for now. You can see my design is now in perspective with the entire length of the room. If I ever need to change it up, you can tweak it and make it look the way you need it to be. Second step you need to do is to make it look believable. Having this on here right now just looks too flat, plus it's covering up everything. So I'm going to go to my layers palette and change my layer mode from normal. In my case, multiply works best. In some instances, you may want to use overlay. Overlay will pick up some of the lights and darks, especially if you have an area that's got a lot of light to it. But mine doesn't, so multiply is what we'll choose. And now you can see my pixels are blending in with the colors that are behind the area that I'm working with. If you ever did this for a package that had some color to it, you may actually need to desaturate the color on the package before you did this to turn it into black and white pixels. The final step in this process is to create a layer mask to mask out the areas so that we can see the desks and the chairs on top of it without it covering up that way. So I'm going to go to my layers. Let's make a new layer mask. I'll grab my brush tool and let's get a good brush, good soft tip brush to work with. Make sure it's the right size. Remember, black conceals, white reveals. And we're just going to paint over this area. You can take a lot more time than I am and paint out everything that's not part of the wall. Another option you could have done was to go ahead and pre-select using your selection tools this area, and when you created the vector mask, it would have already stamped out the area of the mask that you're working on. But in my case, I enjoy the challenge, and I'm just going to paint over what I'm working on. The more time I spend making this look correct, the better it will work out. To give you an idea of what I meant by changing your layer mask instead of using multiply, if I was to use, say, this wall, you can see this wall has the brighter areas that I'm working on. And if I was to put my object on top of this one using just multiply, I'll do it real quick just to show you. Got this one, I'll drag it on. I'm just going to do a choppy job and kind of eyeball it to show you what it would look like. Remember, you can go to Edit, Transform, want to distort it. And I'll just kind of quickly place it into place. Right here. So let's say it was covering up the wall that way. Well, if I chose multiply, it looks pretty good, but my lights up here at the top are kind of getting blown out. What I want to do, if I chose overlay, still, it's a little bit lighter. Let's try another one. Soft light, hard light. Soft light gets a little lighter. Screen sometimes would work, or lighten would work out best that way. Maybe multiply was the best one, or color burn. Hey, color burn's giving you a great object there. Now I'm really getting those lights right there in the darks down that way. Main thing is you need to play around with it to make sure you're getting the best composition for what you're creating.